Hello to everybody, again this is another video tutorial from this bust from HeraModels. Remember that you told me that you want to see how I painted this bust, or you want to see how you should improve your skill level when you are painting bust, because it's not the same paint at 28mm than a miniature like this, because sometimes it's huge. And because you told me that you want to start to paint with your airbrush, I decided to start on this project with my airbrush. Remember that my way to paint is my system, but some students call it capibases. This is just a joke, so you can call it as you like it. The idea will be start with a first shadow and then paint the next layers going up, always going to the highest light, just one direction, straight to this color, to this light, just that. So if you started with your airbrush and you have painted with two colors as I explained you in the previous video tutorial, remember that now you have two different options. The first one will be use a bit more water inside of your mix, like 2 drops or maybe 3 will be enough, but don't use glazes, because if you use glazes then you will just paint over a surface with a lot of pures and all of that will absorb the water, so you will create like a strange brush strokes, so it will be weird. So I don't recommend you. I recommend you dilute a bit the paint and then paint as a copy base, more or less. It's like you can paint with 2 or 3 layers with exactly the same color. With this idea, with this mix, you can paint and create gradients and will be easier to continue painting with a base coat painted with airbrush. As you see in this model, I try to represent like in a drawing, because I wanted to break again the rules and show you something different. So forget the zenithal light, forget this kind of concept, because in that case I tried to paint and draw everything on that model. So in that case, because that model has made it with a 3D printer, with a set brush or another software, it's too perfect. And sometimes when you paint something artistic, you need to see some mistakes. So in that case, if you make mistakes, it's more interesting than if everything looks perfectly, because we look like a computer made it. So in my opinion, it's not my taste. So it's not my cup of tea. I want to create something else, create some information extra. So I try to draw as a freehand some lines to create some muscles. If you can understand that part, I recommend you first search information on Google about bodies, about the anatomy, and then try to draw these kind of muscles or lines to create this expression, this tension. Because if you try to paint from your memory, maybe your result could look different than you imagine. For example, if I said you have to paint a penguin, maybe you will know how to paint it, but this animal, maybe you know more or less how it is, but there are some of them, some different animals. Some of them will have another colors and some of them other different. So for that reason, if you try to paint from your memory, maybe the result could look as a penguin or maybe different. So for that reason, I recommend you search information about this animal and then paint it. In that case, with an orc, is more or less the same. You can find orcs on Google, but for sure you will find informations like illustrations or something like that from this kind of fantasy warriors. And after that, just try to paint the anatomy like you can see on these illustrations. Something like that. It's more like a 2D than a 3D. And as you see on the screen, I used another new tool. So in that case, I used the sponge to paint and create these mistakes, this information, these pores, these details, okay? Because the 3D print to me, it's too perfect, so I don't like it. And because the company told me, Sergio, we need the best from you, I decide to create something else. The sculpture is amazing, but because I prefer something more traditional with some mistakes, and this model don't have it, I prefer add this information, these dots, these scratches, this result, because with this you will get something more interesting, more artistic. And as for the face, some of you told me that you want to know how to paint a face. In that case, I'm going to show you with a big zoom. I will like to show you everything on this video tutorial. So the idea will be show you how to paint this face. For this video tutorial, I would like to give you enough time to see everything on the screen, because I think my brush and my model will speak better than me if I try to explain you everything about the face. The idea in that case was that I tried to represent something more like a old warrior. If you saw the previous video tutorial, you will remember that I've painted one side and I compare with the other side because it looks more like a younger orc. But in that case, I would like to get something more expressive, more like an old warrior. So we have to paint with more details, more information. For this idea, I decided to paint with this kind of stippling. Maybe you think that this is not a perfect stippling, or maybe to you it's an stippling. This to me is just a way to create a texture, to create information. If you create these kind of dots, then you can continue working inside of this area that you painted with the next layer. So if you continue working on the same area, then you can build up a volume. So this is the idea how I explain you to create these geometrical shapes. And if you check well this video tutorial, you'll see that I forget the cenital light, okay? This idea is paint like a 2D, not like a 3D. For sure it's like a 3D, you can see everything like a 3D, right? But if you see, I've painted inside of the folds or inside of the wrinkles of the skin or the clothes or from other stuff, because my idea is try to draw perfectly everything, like in a drawing. If this idea is difficult to understand it well, I recommend you find some illustrations on Google, because it will be easier to understand. Sometimes some illustrators, some drawers or painters use this technique or these tricks to define everything, because they don't have volumes to represent. So they need to build up these volumes with the light and the shadow. So sometimes use this kind of like an edge highlights to define it. We don't have edge highlights. We don't have the edging here because it's a skin. But if we try to paint inside of the wrinkle, we'll draw the wrinkle. And then if we continue working on that with next layers, we can create a volume. So for that reason, you see that I continue painting and painting on the same places. But every time, every layer is just a bit smaller. It's just draw lines like on a freehand. In that case, it's easier to understand it because you have a lot of wrinkles on the forehead from this model. If you don't have them, it's up to you. If you paint them, will look older. If you don't paint them, will look younger. Just that. In that case, because my idea was represent like an old, very old barbarian, you need to create this kind of expression. It looks more interesting. And as for the eyes, I have a real key to give you. I think it's a trick, it's easy, and maybe with all levels skills you can do it. So don't worry about your skill because you'll do well. If you are right hand, okay, you should paint first the left eye. Or if you are left hand, you should paint the right eye. Why? Because if you are right hand, the left eye is the hardest to you. Sometimes you try to paint the eyes and it's difficult to you, right? So you go straight to the easy eye to you, it's the right. So you paint it and it's done, perfect. You painted where you need it, how you want it, perfect. But then when you need to paint the left eye, is difficult to you because the angle when you paint it's difficult. You can feel comfortable when you are painting there. So maybe you can make a mistake and the other eye it's watching to another place. So you make the mistake and then you try to fix it. So, and tip easy to fix them from the scratch. Paint first the difficult eye to you. In that case, if you are right hand, paint the left eye. Maybe you want to paint the eye watching to the left, but maybe you have painted watching to the right. But don't care, because then when you paint the right eye, will be easy to you to paint it. So it will be easy to fix it. It's like paint like on a mirror, exactly the same, to the same angle, to the same place. If you made a mistake, but your eye is watching to the right eye will be watch to the right side. Just that, something easy. So this is the key. First, start to paint with the difficult eye to you. Just that. And as for the eyes, remember, when you are painting a face, it's really important, focus all the attention on the eyes and then the mouth or lips. It's the only two places where you express something with your face. So, at least in this model. So, because this model it's a bust, you have to add more and more information. So, I recommend you, as you saw on the screen, paint a dot to represent the eye with a black color or a very dark color. Just that. If it was hard to you, just stop there. Just stop it. It's done, okay? Don't worry. Just finish that project and then to the next one, we'll try to paint the next step. But if you feel that you can do it, this moment is to you. So you have to paint the iris now with the color that you want, but always lighter, with more contrast. Light, very light. If you see, I use this kind of yellows because I wanted to represent something like this, but with a lot of contrast between the dot that you made it to use as a outlining and then this iris. And then you have to paint the pupil and if you want, the bright that you will see. It's difficult, I know, but I give you different tools. If you paint just a dot, it's done. If you paint the iris, maybe it could look like blind. So if you want to paint the iris, I recommend you paint the pupil too. And then, if you have enough area to work, if you have room, paint the bright. And you will have the model like this, with this kind of eyes. So, as you see, you can paint the eye. So this is the result. I hope you enjoy watching this and you try to do it because, as I said, always, this is your hobby, this is to enjoy, so you have to enjoy when you are painting and when you are watching these video tutorials. Sometimes I can express me well in English, but I think with these video tutorials, with this huge zoom, with everything that we made, you will understand perfectly everything. At least the places where I use the brush strokes, how I use the layers, how I paint, where I paint the light, the shadows, everything. For example, on that part of the eye, I've painted in the middle, in the center again. Why? Because I want to reinforce again this volume. Okay, so forget the cenital light, forget if you think that this area is with shadow, I have to keep it with a dark color, forget it. Just paint another layer to build up this volume. Just that, something easy. And now, as for the teeth, as you see, just one brush stroke and will be enough. Why? Because it's tiny, so you don't have to invest a lot of time there. And for example, on this tooth, on the bottom of the mouth, or the teeth from the jaw, you have different options. The first one will be paint only the edging, the edge highlights, just that. Or the way I've painted the edge highlight, okay, the edging, and the body of these teeth. But then, if you choose this idea, you have to repaint the edging at the end with a color higher. And as for these big teeth, what you should do? As you see on your screen, first draw the outlining, painting this light lining. It's like an outlining with light, or like an edging headlights, but in that case you have to draw this line. If you draw this line that you can see now, you will define perfectly this outlining and will be perfect to define where stop or start this tooth. And then it's just paint some lines to create this contrast between the light and the shadow. You can use the previous color, the base coat, as a background or as a shadow. Will be perfect. And with this idea, you will create more contrast and will look more like a shiny teeth. But because this is an old orc, I recommend you create a texture to create some information there, because if it's completely clean, nobody will believe it. And for example, now with the tongue, I recommend you this technique. Paint with the point of your brush to paint everything. It's like an stippling, but with more control. You have to aim where you want, and with more precision, you will paint a lot of dots to cover the area that you need. Why? Because with this idea, we'll have more control to paint in the place that you need. And because in the tongue you can create a texture too, you can make it easy. However, if you use brush strokes in an area tiny like this, maybe the first brush strokes is okay, but the second maybe is more or less okay. But then if you need something else, more contrast, paint the last light, maybe it's difficult to add it because you don't have enough area to use the brush strokes. So for that reason, I recommend you paint with this kind of stippling. It's not like an stippling, it's just use the point of your brush to paint as thinner as possible in the places that you need. And because I said that you should use this stippling on the teeth, here you have it. The next layer with this stippling to create a texture on the teeth. Because if you paint them perfectly smooth, will look like he was in the dentist. Who was at the dentist last weekend. So I can't believe in an orc without, I don't know, with a clean mouth. So for that, at the end, you will see how I use green or another crazy colors on the teeth or inside of the mouth. And as for the lips, this is interesting. This is another kind of texture, and you have to paint with straight lines to define this, just to create a different material, in that case, the lip. And the way to do it will be paint with the base coat, paint the first layer with thick lines. Okay, the size of these lines should be thicker. And then the next layers with the straight lines, the same, but will be thinner. It's like with the pixels on a movie or a video game. If you see only 100 pixels, all of them will be super huge or thicker than should be. So the result will look like blurry or like don't look perfect, don't look sharp. So to fix that idea, you have to understand this like the pixels. When you create a texture, I recommend you paint it as thinner as possible. But if you paint everything super thin, maybe nobody will see the different layers. For that reason, I recommend you start with something thicker and then something thinner. And here you have the result. If in some moments on this video tutorial you see that something is blurry or doesn't appear the model, it's because we wanted to show you everything. The places where I the places where I painted, or how I made the mixes, something. So because I want to show you everything, because if I don't show you, maybe someone will say that Sergio don't want to show me something, and maybe it's the key. So I don't want give you this feeling, okay? I want that you send me the feedback that I made a real good video tutorial and you learned a lot. So this is my key, this is my idea. So for that I'm working hard to bring you my best level and my best video tutorials. And for that reason, I decided to show you how I painted the ears, because I've seen a lot of miniatures in a painting contest with a real good model, but with the ears just with the base coat, or maybe with one layer, like, okay, it's done. Nobody cares. No, please, you have to paint everything and more when you are painting the face. So this is really, really important. So paint the ears too. How you have to paint them? It's like a concave form or shape. You have to paint the light on the bottom and the shadow on the top. Just that. And because I told you that I would like to show you how I blend with the brush, this is how I blend with the brush. It's just make a dilution between 50-50 or 60-40, 60% water, and just paint with one brush stroke over the place that you want to blend. Start to paint in other places and keep enough time to dry the surface. Once time is dried, if you need something else, you can paint again with another brush stroke over there. And this is the way to blend with the brush. To me, it's perfect if you need to aim or have more control in some places, but I prefer blend with the airbrush because I think I try to give you a real quick tool to have a perfect smooth glazing. But if in some places you can't blend with airbrush, this is the way, okay? You will need more time, but the result should be the same, but I think will be similar because the airbrush is a perfect tool to do it. And this is another layer. You have to paint the ears with more than one layer. So check well what places I used to paint with the next layers, because I didn't repaint everything. I continue adding layers in some places. Places where I have room, enough area to continue working on that. So basically this was this video tutorial. I hope you have enjoyed watching this video tutorial. I try to bring you my best on this to show you how to paint faces and how to paint a bust. So enjoy with this, and I hope you can continue following our video tutorials and see you in the next step, because I think I'm going to surprise you again. So once time again with this face at the end, thank you very much for your huge support and see you. Bye bye.